Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone who has joined. And I'm super excited for this webinar today, our series of transforming transportation through technology. I'm going to look a little underdressed when our panelists come on, but I wore this shirt today because it was part of our bicycle program at Delaware DOT when I was the secretary there about 10 years ago. And we actually went from 31st to 3rd in the country in terms of bicycle friendly state rankings. And we did it mostly by going out and striping a bunch of bike lanes out there. And what I think we've learned in the last 10 years is that, distracted driving is a real issue for us. And if we really want people to go out there and bike and be, reducing our carbon footprint and doing these things, we've got to do more than put paint out there. We've got to connect bicyclists, vulnerable road users, pedestrians, and all these folks using technology solutions that are available today. And so we're really excited about this possible future. So we're not making, huge investments in our 21st century transportation system using 20th century thinking. And so today we're really excited to have some of the leading minds in this space around the intersection of technology in transportation. We have Suzanne Murtha, who's the national lead for connected and automated technology with AECOM. Steve Kusiemba, who, in addition to Suzanne, also used to work at ITS America back in the day, who is with HNTB, with WSP, and is their national ITS and CAV practice lead. And then Greg Krueger, who is the interim intelligent transportation and emerging mobility solutions leader at HNTB Corporation. And to bring it all together is a good friend of mine, Tok Somashaken, who I knew when I was the secretary in Delaware and the director in Colorado. He was with the Tennessee DOT at that time. And now he's moved on to a little bit bigger system, knows a thing or two about managing a large system. And really California, where Tokes is the director of Caltrans now, is really at the epicenter of technology and transportation. And all of this will culminate next year with our World ITS World Congress in LA. So with that, Tokes, are you there?
Yes, Shaylin, good afternoon to you there on the West Coast. Good to see you, my friend, again. And thanks for the invitation to be a part of this, what I believe is a very important conversation. But by the way, you're not underdressed. You are dressed very, very appropriately. I like the mention of the growth that you were able to perform in your former state in Delaware to increase that ranking there, and how much multimodal transportation also plays a role in this important discussion today. So if I could take the reins from you, Shaylin, and get us going this morning, or it's the morning here, afternoon, in some other parts of the country here. This is one of the most important parts of the convergence that I believe is happening in our space, in the transportation space in America today. I can't think of a more exciting time for us in transportation than the one that we're going through now. This big infrastructure debate that we're having, we're trying to understand, look, what are the policy implications of some of the directions that we're thinking about? What are the funding decisions that we need to make and change? And so as we discuss that, there's no doubt that technology will play a big role in that. And like you said, Shaylin, California is at the forefront of it. Our agency secretary, David Kim, here in California, he's a board member at ITS America. And so I know he's heavily involved in many of these discussions, and California will continue to be, I believe, at the forefront of these discussions, because whether it be broadband or transit, signalization or DRC units and roadway infrastructure, all those things ultimately are about making people's lives better. So a very exciting time for us across the country. So before I bring the panel up, let me set the stage just a little bit more and run through a few slides here to explain sort of where we are in California. So I mentioned the convergence of this big national discussion that we're having on infrastructure. and policy issues around it and funding issues around it. One of the key things that is a part of that discussion is no doubt equity. And we at Caltrans in California, we're trying to make sure we're not in any way ambiguous about what equity means to us. We're trying to be as clear as possible. And part of being as clear as possible means that in every single phase of the work we do at Caltrans, we're going to consider equity. That it's just embedded in how we do our work. It's become a foundational piece or major aperture through which a lot of our work is happening. And as we do that work, we're increasingly recognizing the benefits of thinking about technology and intelligent transportation as we make those policy decisions and investments. That it, like Shaylin was saying, it's not all about necessarily building something out, but as we face those mobility challenges, how does technology, how does intelligent transportation systems, how do they play a role as we look to become more equitable? Next slide. And so we've developed a framework at Caltrans to guide our decision-making around equity. And again, in every sense of what we do, not just in projects, where a lot of us, where our knowledge base has grown in recent years, but in every facet as much as we can. So for us, we call it the 4 Ps of equity at Caltrans. Number 1, our people. The fact that we need to have a workforce at Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, that reflects the people we serve as much as we possibly can. Not only reflecting the people we serve in a very diverse state, but also when they come on board, the hiring, the promoting, the training that they need to advance, all the way from if they come in at a rank and file level, all the way to senior management. Those are all things that we are we're putting into higher consideration than we ever have before. When it comes to projects and programs, I mentioned the fact that I think so many of us have grown in this area over especially the last year, and recognizing how our transportation projects have provided some uplift in some communities, but have also hampered, in many cases, some of the communities that we serve. So trying to make sure that we do engagement better than we have before, true engagement, genuine engagement with communities to better deliver projects and programs is one of the things we're focused on. Partnerships is about the fact that we know at state DOTs and city DOTs, we have a big financial economic impact on communities, and we can use our business partners to help deliver that impact in a way that's truly equitable. Our small business program in California, at Caltrans specifically, is $1.2 billion, just our small business program. So we know the potential we have to really connect through DBE and small business efforts to connect with Hispanic, Latino, and other indigenous groups to help carry out our business. And finally, the Planet P is about the fact that we know that some of the negative impacts of the transportation decisions that we've made in the past in the 20th century and some in the 21st century, there have been disproportionate impacts in underserved communities, and we need to reverse that. And that's the Planet P. Next slide. Shaylin mentioned this as well, the fact that California is seen in many cases as one of the most innovative places around the country, around the world. We have 5 priorities at Caltrans that we launched when I started my tenure here a little over 20 months ago. And innovation is one of those priorities, one of those 5 key priorities. And when you think about the fact that Apple, Google, Uber, Lyft, all are right here in our state, and a big part of the California economy, I don't want us to ever hesitate and being able to say that Caltrans is right up there with those entities in the work that we do when it comes to innovation. And that clearly ties into, next slide, clearly ties into using TSMO. I think all of us understand clearly TSMO and the impact and potential that it plays when it comes to delivering solutions for communities. We haven't used these as much as I think we potentially can, from traffic management centers to changeable message signs, our ITS architecture, all those things. If we dig a little deeper, and Caltrans can dig deeper in this area, we haven't reached our potential when it comes to our utilization of TSMO strategies to solve our transportation problems. But if we embrace this more, I believe we can get more out of the current infrastructure system that we've put together today. Next slide. And in doing so, what's helping us realize this potential even more? I think in this graphic, as we talk about in California very often, maybe not all states are here or cities are here. One of the things we want to do is reduce VMT because we know the impacts clearly that has had environmentally and sustainability in the state. But as we try to reduce VMT, the strategies that we've increasingly embraced, if you look at the bottom right corner, if you will, of this graphic, the bottom right corner is where we've spent a lot of time in helping to reduce that VMT, from park and ride, bus, rail, active transportation, managed lanes. We've gone there for a lot of the strategies. But when you think about what's causing a lot of the problems that's leading to traffic congestion and even some VMT increases, it's a lot of weather related issues and incidents and work zone and special events. We need to start to figure out how to balance in or bring in more TSMO related strategies, because we know they will truly help us sort of on this left side of the panel. Next slide. Connected autonomous vehicle technology is something that Caltrans and California has led the way on since the 1990s in working with OEMs in the state. And I believe we will continue to be leaders in the industry. And as we think about how our infrastructure can support V2I and V2V and V2X more, we want to be at the forefront. And I know other state DOTs and city DOTs are very much thinking about this space as well. Next slide. We're also leading the way when it comes to electrifying the transportation future. Our governor, I think, is probably the most aggressive governor in the country now and probably in history when it comes to thinking about the transportation's role in GHG and climate challenges. And he's pushed the state, and I believe the entire OEM industry several years forward by saying in a rare 8 or 9 years, every single light duty vehicle produced in the state needs to be electric. And that's very much connected to the CAV conversation as well. Next slide. I'll end with this and bring the panel on. This particular quote is one of the most inspiring quotes for me. And since I've been in the transportation space for nearly 20 years, it's one of the things that whenever I get down about not seeing progress in our industry, this is one thing that this particular statement keeps me motivated about the potential and the fight that we need to continue to have. And I'll read it real quick, and you'll see who said this. You'll be surprised who actually made this statement. Nothing is more dramatically apparent than the inadequacy of transportation in our larger urban areas. The solution cannot be found only in construction of additional urban highways. Vital as that job is, other means for mass transportation, which use less space and equipment, must be improved and expanded. Perhaps even more important, planning for transportation and land use must go hand in hand as two inseparable aspects of the same process. So this sounds like something somebody probably would have said, a year ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. You'd be surprised if you click next. This was actually said by President Kennedy in an address to Congress exactly 60 years ago, last month, he was making a statement. President Kennedy was making a statement because his predecessor, General Eisenhower, had just launched the nation into what we call the greatest public works project in history, the building of the interstate and highway system. But his successor here, President Kennedy, was saying, look, building additional highways, constructing highways, it's a vital job. Let's do that, but let's not forget what's important. The fact that we can build out a transportation system that uses less space, uses less equipment. We need to think about transit. And we think about land use and transportation being something that are inseparable, that go hand in hand. And this rings true very much today still. We have to keep the good fight going to make sure that the focus and investment and policy is not just on expanding the infrastructure we've built up, but that we marry technology that uses less space and think about planning for the future in a more equitable, climate-friendly way. So with that, I want to jump into what I'm looking forward to an esteemed panel. Yeah, by the way, if you want to reach me, email, Twitter, and other means, phone. I don't think people still make phone calls anymore. But if you want to reach me, here's the good way to get in, possibly get in touch with me. So if we could, bring in the very esteemed panel. Look forward to having a conversation with Greg, Steve, and Susan. And again, thanks, Shaylin, you, Ron, and Kathy at ITS America for continuing to lift up this very, very important issue as we continue to grow our transportation system. So I'm going to start with Susan. Good to see the three of you this afternoon. But I'm going to jump into with Susan first, and then Greg and Steve, if you guys could be prepared to go next. Susan, so when you think about us state DOTs and city DOTs, I mean, we're at a very pivotal juncture here. How is this work going with us? How are firms like yours, AECOM, how are you engaging us when it comes to ITS related issues? What's going well and what's probably not going so well? Where do we need to grow, I guess, is part of that question a little bit, but welcome. Susan?
Thank you. Thank you. So with regard to ITS, you know, I think we've made incredible strides maybe in the past 20 years, right? We've sponsored connected vehicle deployments. California is out ahead with automation, as you mentioned, with collecting data from automation, where California is one of the lead states in getting standardized collection of data from automated vehicles. That's all really amazing work. And so it's super exciting to be a part of that. I think that and a shift is we're going to see some shifts with regard to more automation, and we're going to look forward to also probably some shifts in payment systems, which will be exciting too. Maybe we can get more equity in terms of paying for road use, with, as you mentioned, road use charge. So those are some trends that we'll see in the future, which are, you know, very exciting to look forward to. I think that and I think that will naturally happen as technology evolves and we continue to work together to build those out.
Thank you. Greg? You're on mute, Greg.
Sorry. A lot of it comes down to innovation throughout the organization. And that's something that's a key. It was when I was DOT a number of years ago. It's making sure that innovation just isn't seen by 2 or 3 people or one office within the organization. It's innovation throughout the entire organization, from roadway design to maintenance and operations staff, through your signals team and through the ITS team. It's looking at innovation, looking at continually looking at better ways to do things. Funding is, no matter what happens with funding in Washington, is always going to be a challenge for a DOT. There's always more projects, always more infrastructure that's needed, always better operations that we can do, and all of that requires money. If there are ways that we can use innovation to do that better, more effectively, more efficiently, that's the key. an example from a number of years ago. We started collecting data from here or INRIX, or those companies that do the travel time data. It was the operations side of the organization that really took the lead in saying, we, the state, are going to buy this data. We're going to use it because it reduces our reliance on detectors. It reduces our reliance on infrastructure and allows us to get a broader area with better data. Now, if you take a look at an agency, that data is being used, that same contract is being used by every part of the agency for something different. So they're able to break down some of those silos and use that innovation that's coming from operations. So I see things like that continuing, where we're able to find that new innovative process, that new innovative project, that breaking down of walls between groups and sharing that innovation so that we're all able to grow from it and continue to improve.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Steve?
To build on what Greg and Suzanne mentioned, especially with respect to data, many of our planners and engineers have stopped saying that's how it's always been done. And they've started using data to really begin analyzing trends and trying to understand the future better. And that's how a lot of that innovation is happening. You also asked, Tokes, of what may not be working so well. And sometimes from the funding and the procurement side, that's how it's always been done, is still in place. And that's probably one of the areas that I think is going to continue to evolve. If our expectations remain here, we're going to have to get over some of those barriers. And that's going to cause us to stop saying that's how it's always been done. Planners and engineers have adopted that, and we'll hopefully bring the rest of them kicking and screaming up to the table as well.
That's a challenge, that part. I mean, one of the fun things about the work that we all do is the fact that this industry, when people get into it, they stay for a long time, and we get really comfortable sometimes, and we get used to the traditional way of doing the work. And when the new ideas come up, sometimes we're challenged with embracing that new direction. But I'm glad to hear the three of you, your input there on how that's changing, how we're being a little bit more open. So if I could jump to another question here, when we think about the future, and I'll start with you, Steve. When we think about the future, we're in the 21st century today. What role does technology really play in this space as we start to think about the future more and more? And why are these smart investments? I mean, we're trying to make the case more and more. All three of you mentioned funding and how important that is. But as we try to make the case for this, we need to be able to say why these are smart investments. Like, be able to make strong and valid points about that. So, Steve, if you could, why are these smart investments? What role does technology play in that future transportation system that we're trying to create?
Technology is an increasing part of all of our lives, in every part of our lives, and just as much so in transportation. From every step of the process, in the planning and the engineering up front, as we mentioned, using the data smarter, but also building on what Greg said, being able to manage our existing facilities, our existing transit and highway systems more efficiently, taking that real-time data, putting it into a feedback loop, learning from it in real time and adjusting. Technology allows us to collect more information more accurately, faster, and in larger quantities, and then react to it, whether it's humans reacting to it or artificial intelligence algorithms giving us advice on how to react to it, or even taking directive actions as well. Technology is all around us. It helps us generate more awareness of what's going on, and it helps us react to it as well.
Yeah, good points. Greg?
Yeah, and I think Steve's right. Technology is all around us. And when you buy a car, if you bought a car in 2015, that car technology-wise, is already starting to push the end of its life. There's things that now that we're able to buy in a 2020, 2021 model. The car is more efficient. The car is better crash worthy because it's able to detect and prevent crashes. And it's better connected. So the consumer, the users of our system, our roadway system, are already seeing technology. They're demanding more from us. The same is true of transit users. They're able to pull up their cell phone and get the transit schedules, and they wonder why I can get my Uber real time to know exactly when it's going to arrive, exactly where it's going to arrive, but I can't get that same information from my bus or my train schedule. So they're already seeing it in their day-to-day lives. So the users of our system are expecting it from all of us as we deploy and operate transportation systems. They're expecting us to know when a road is flooded. They're expecting us to know when a bridge has got concerns about its structural integrity. They're expecting that from us because they see it in other parts of their lives as well. And we need to continue to grow, and we need to tell the story about why technology is important to us and why technology is important to the users of our system. And I think we haven't done a real good job of that. So telling those stories and documenting those use cases where we're using better data to manage our traffic system, better our traffic signal system, where we're able to communicate traffic signal data directly to a vehicle, whether it's directly through CV or indirectly through a cell system and some of the providers that are out there, and how that's benefiting users. The ability to document why emergency vehicle preemption and transit priority are able to better provide operations, reduce travel time, improve the efficiency. We all know that. We live it day to day, but we don't tell that story real well, and we need to do a much better job of that.
Yeah, that's really important points you make there, Greg, about being able to not only put together the data, but to be able to share the compelling stories about that tie those things together as we make the case for future investment that embraces technology a little bit more. Suzanne, your thoughts on this? You're on mute, Suzanne.
Oh, okay. I think that Steve and Greg were spot on. Thank you, folks. And I think I would even maybe dive a little bit deeper. You asked why we should. And, you know, I want to put some numbers to that, right? Because the reason why we should is because it can save our lives. Fundamentally, NHTSA has shown that connected vehicles could reduce unimpaired crashes by up to 84%, by 84%. And that, you know, we know that humans cause about 95% of crashes. All crashes are about 95% human cause. So the more that we can automate of the human function in the driving task, I mean, the amount of lives we can save is phenomenal. And to Greg's point, the ability to integrate this into transit, our automated bus consortium, we're looking, you know, we'll be buying, you know, up to 100 highly automated buses that will be able to assist drivers and being able to execute the transit functions that Greg described, you know, much more safely and much more efficiently. And so, yeah, they're absolutely right. And those are the numbers. The numbers show that this type of technology can save lives and get us everywhere a lot faster.
Yeah, no, I think you make some good points there, Suzanne. Suzanne, there's been some question lately about those NHTSA numbers. I know we've been using those numbers a lot lately, but there's a concept that's been coming around lately called a safe systems approach that's challenging a little bit of that notion. But I think connected autonomous technology is no doubt gonna help us from a safety standpoint, from right. An environmental standpoint, and even congestion management standpoint. I think we know those three areas we stand to see a lot of future benefit, no doubt there.
And equity too, right? We don't want to, I mean, you know, being able to figure out how to do payment systems more efficiently can enable a lot of equity in that system. And even if those numbers, Tokes, if they're too big, if they're above zero, if they're any kind of multiple better than where we are now, that's still a reason why.
Completely agree with you on that. That's a very good point. So part of the challenge for us still, as we continue this conversation, when you look at the graphic that Shaylin started with as you were speaking, and that I had, if you can rewind your minds back a little bit and think about those two graphics, very much a sort of futuristic looking graphic that I had, and that ITS, Rachel and Elizabeth, everybody they had up. But it's urban in context. It's very much sort of, you know, tall buildings, skyscrapers in an urban setting. But part of what we have to continue to do in making the case for future-proofing infrastructure in this country is the rural suburban connection, and being able to link up places that are, traditionally sort of left out. And oh yeah, technology doesn't matter in that part of the country or whatever. But how do we connect this entire system of rural, suburban, low income, underserved, and not just the fancy growing downtown? Susan, I'm going to continue with you in this part of it still as well, and then we'll keep going around.
Yeah, they're both so important, aren't they? And so we found that that there's one of the problems with, especially with transit in rural, is even being able to support that. If we want to electrify transit, it's challenging for the longer routes, right? To be able to electrify those buses in an efficient way. And so we're looking at ways to support that, such as electrification inside the roadways. That's a potential solution that will allow transit bus routes to be expanded and with electrified vehicles. We're also supporting at least one of our automated bus consortium routes is a rural route, because we want to look at how we can do that and how the impact of supporting a driver and perhaps enabling a driver through automation to be able to do longer routes more safely and be able to support more people that way, if we have to rely less on humans to be able to execute those tasks. So it is a big challenge about how we can equitably distribute transit and how we can equitably solve those problems. I agree.
Yeah, big challenge for us there. Greg, your thoughts on not just the big urban center, but all of it: low income, underserved, rural, suburban. How do we make sure we're doing work in that space as well?
Well, there's two parts of that. One is the transportation network that we have connects everybody, or should be able to connect everybody. We have roads and bridges that cross every major river, every major piece of land in the country, and can connect basically everybody. We need to be able to use that infrastructure more efficiently, whether it's providing better bus service, making sure that the system is in good condition for not potholes, it's able to be driven on, but also using that infrastructure and leveraging the fact that we have right of way, that we can provide broadband service as needed to be able to raise up communities, raise up businesses, and allow opportunities that a lot of us take for granted, teleworking, for example, to be able to be used anywhere across the country. And that's a challenge that we need to be able to continue to work on, of how we can use the infrastructure that we've got to be able to support basically broadband and things like that a lot of us take for granted. Secondly, we need to take a look at how we can use technology to break down some of the divides that our transportation system have created. Building some roads and bridges have separated communities and caused irreparable damage. Are there ways that we can, as some of those roads and bridges that we've built are converted back to less from a freeway to more of an urban boulevard, for example? How do we use technology to maintain the same throughput, to maintain the same level of operations, but also at the same time changing the infrastructure to be able to allow those communities to come back together? Things like bus rapid transit that can be done a lot more effectively and affordably than light rail transit, just because of the infrastructure that's required. As Suzanne mentioned, autonomous buses, autonomous transit, to be able to increase ridership and be able to hit that first last mile. In fact, even to be able to hit that first last 100 feet to get from people from the doorway to the vehicle to the main route. So we've got a lot of things that we can use with technology to be able to bring communities back together, as we're working in some of the infrastructure changes to bring communities back together as well, to ensure that we don't lose the functionality, or we don't lose the ability to safely and efficiently move people.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Steve, the holistic look at this issue, not just urban areas. What's your take?
I mean, the holistic approach is basically looking at people, processes, infrastructure, vehicles, technology. It's looking at your whole environment that you're doing to. When you're trying to make an argument for technology, in particular in an urban area, many of those problems are low-hanging fruit, so to speak. They're quick. They're just quick to recognize where technology can help. When you're making the case in the more rural areas, there's a lot of technology applications that can make huge benefits, both from a safety and an economic standpoint in the rural areas. From a safety, trying to use connected vehicle applications to reduce single vehicle runoff road accidents, which are the most common, cause of fatalities in rural areas. From an economic standpoint, using connected vehicle technology to enable truck platooning, which also has a safety component as well as an economic and an environmental component as well. So there's a lot of potential arguments that can be made for the rural application, just as much as there are for the urban. But sometimes those get left out of the dialogue because the urban ones are just so prominent and they're so deep. But we can't forget both. And the holistic approach allows us to think about all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the last slide I had there with President Kennedy, he was talking about how vital, the job of constructing the highway system is. It's 60 to 70 years behind us now. I believe, and I think you all will agree, we've mostly built out that infrastructure. I mean, over the last 70 years. We're not going to ever build in this country what we've built over the last 70 years as far as a highway system. So how do we get more out of it? And Greg was touching on this a little bit already. I mean, since we've already built this system, how do we get more out of it? I think of a particular project here that's raised a lot of eyebrows in California, I-710. It's in the Long Beach, LA area. It's a major freight corridor, not only in California, but a feeder to the rest of the country. And we and city government were looking at possibly expanding that interstate, I-710, but it's also in a minority underserved community that has, taken the brunt of a highway gutting through it many years ago. So instead of expanding 710, we're having to go back to the table and say, okay, what are some of the other tools that we can put in place, potentially some technology solutions that can help freight move better on 710. So a lot said there, but the question essentially is, how do we get more out of this infrastructure that we've built over the last 60 to 70 years to sustain its lifespan using technology? Greg, you were touching on this already. I'll go to you first, and then Steve and Susan.
So I'll start with the non-technology approach, which is we have to keep it in good operating condition. So it does no good to have I-710 or I-75 or I-94 as a gravel road because we're not able to repair potholes. And we need to continue to keep our bridges, keep the road in good or better operating condition. The surface needs to be smooth, the base needs to be created, the structure needs to be sound, and we need to keep that focus as well. We can put all the technology in the world out there, but if the road doesn't exist because it's fallen apart, we haven't gained anything. With that, we need to really work with our technology partners on automation. As Suzanne mentioned, 94% of crashes are the result of drivers and driver error. Automation takes a lot of that out of our hands, and we can do things like truck platooning or bus platooning and be able to operate at tighter headways at higher speeds with less chance of crashing and have things move safer. We need to think smarter about projects. We do a lot of light rail projects, for example, which have been fantastic projects, and they move a lot of people. But are there ways that we can do that less expensively instead of using track, using just pavement and buses or automated buses to be able to get the same benefit? Looking at even going as far as personal rapid transit, are there those types of solutions that can move a lot of people differently? It's a push, but thinking differently about how we deploy transit operations to be able to hit that first last mile. So it's using technology and the advances in technology and working with our innovation partners to be able to identify solutions and implement those solutions that can take advantage of infrastructure. If we can get rid of the 2-second headway on a freeway and cut that down to half a second, we've just significantly improved the capacity of the roadway, but we have to do that safely and technology is what's going to help us do that safely.
Yeah, agree with that. Steve, your thoughts on this? How do we get more out of the existing system we have?
I think Greg's points are well taken. And when an agency is sitting back trying to think about, okay, well, how do I achieve all that? That's an awful big order that Greg's just put there on the table. And again, one of the key steps to getting there is data, is understanding the current state of your system, being able to collect as much data. We've been talking about using data for modeling for years now, taking historical data and modeling. But how do you start playing it forward and looking at, okay, well, how is this system going to perform in 2050, 2060, 2070? Because let's face it, our infrastructure is not designed to last 10 years. It's designed to last 50 or 70 years, even though the vehicles on it may be designed to last 10 years. So we have to really start using data more wisely. And the concept of digital twinning and taking data and feeding it into these models and looking at the predictability, looking at your maintenance implications, looking at your operational implications over the long term can help point out efficiencies that can be made by minor enhancements. For example, you may decide that you want to implement ramp metering to improve your performance along a particular section. Or you might find that adding one lane for this one segment is going to have a significant impact. You might find, or you might discover, that keeping a certain bridge maintained on a certain schedule improves the longevity by 10 years. The digital twinning allows you to really look at this holistic operations over the longer term and plan out all of your maintenance, all of your asset management, all of your operations. I've heard it said many times, data is the new oil, and that's really what this is all about. This is taking all that data and using it more wisely.
Data is the new oil. I like that. Suzanne?
I can't take credit for that. I didn't come up with that. I heard that somewhere.
Suzanne, I think that might have been from Shaylin.
It was Tina Quigley, actually, the former RTC head, used that a lot.
Suzanne, your thoughts on getting the most out of this 70-year-old infrastructure without every single thing being let's blow it out and widen it.
And Tokes, as soon as you started talking about that, the first road I thought of was the 710. So it was great that you followed up with that. And I think it's a great example of how we can, of a place where we can make an impact. And I think that Greg is spot on about about automation, and especially about automation with trucks, because that's a lot of the 710, for example. Platooning is possible with automation broadly. It's also useful with trucks. Another aspect of that, even particular 710 as an example, is perhaps payment shifting and variation of payments, so that if we were to charge vehicles that were a certain type, a certain time of day, and incentivize through payments, for example, trucks, maybe in the evening is a better time for trucks to operate. So we incentivize them through charging to operate at night, charge them more during the day. If you need to move people out of the port, if there's a shift change, on the port, maybe we can incentivize folks to be able to leave more efficiently during their shift. There are different ways through payment, and data enables that too, to Steve's point, understanding exactly what type of vehicles are operating when, and when they're on that stretch of road or that particular roadway. As Steve mentioned, maybe there's one lane that we can charge, for a specific type of vehicle to incentivize more efficient use of the road.
Yeah, I completely agree with those comments. Kathy, you're mining some questions out there. Sounds like you've got one or two questions for us as we keep going here.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to throw this out, Tokes, for you and all the panelists. I think you should all feel free to answer this. This came in through the chat box. Recognizing our infrastructure is in poor condition and states are trying to maintain it, how can we ensure there's adequate funding for technology deployment that will support 21st century infrastructure? I know you guys touched on this, but I just wanted to throw that out for any further thoughts.
Yeah, I'll start real quick, and then I'll go to Steve, and then we'll go back the other way again. Look, I know the current administration is when it comes to the federal side of things, I know the current administration is embracing this particular area more and more. I think they recognize Secretary Buttigieg and Polly Trottenberg, who's a friend, and even the president, that when you look at the funding opportunities that they've recently, the NOFOs they've recently rolled out, you can tell that a lot of what we're talking about is eligible under those programs. I think a little bit more emphasis can be placed on this area to incentivize cities and states to go in this direction. One of the things that can obviously be done is, to decrease the matching requirements in this particular place, to encourage cities and states to go here. As a city and a state, when you're making a decision on solutions for a particular area, you want to get the most out of you want to get the biggest bang out of the buck that you're spending. And I think time and time again, it's been shown that this particular area, the ROI on using technology or ITS related solutions, TISMO related solutions, bring the biggest ROI return. I mean, that's been clear time and time again. So just putting more emphasis here and incentivizing this area, I think will help make the difference as we continue to make this transition. Steve, your thoughts on this funding?
I definitely agree that it all starts with eligibility. We have to have as broad eligibility as we can. I agree on the incentives also. The challenge often that I see isn't necessarily at the state level, it's at the local level. States have large programs. They have a fair amount of flexibility across those large programs to be able to insert technology and ITS and TISMO solutions into their mega projects. A lot of smaller local agencies, however, they're battling just to be able to fill potholes or to be able to keep them parking meters maintained. And they often are battling intense politics and political pressure for things like signalized intersections and stop signs and things like that. So they have a lot of challenges that sometimes supersede incentives. So how can funding be dedicated, not just incentivized, but dedicated for some of these particular portions? That will then increase the likelihood that a lot of these solutions, the ITS and the TISMO solutions, can get put out there. And I know ITS America has been fighting for dedicated funding for years. And all I could say is keep up the good fight. It's never going to go away. It's always going to be needed.
That's good stuff. Steve, Greg, your thoughts on this? Funding?
Yeah, Steve really hit it. It's funding at the end of the day. We've got agencies that, and especially the smaller the agencies, they're fighting to keep potholes filled. They're not worried about the fact that their traffic signal controllers are electromechanical and they're not able to get efficiencies out of them that they need to. I was talking to one agency today, and their technology capital program is virtually zero moving forward because of the operations and maintenance costs of the devices they've been deploying over the past 20 years. Where agencies are used to building a road and bridge that lasts 30, 40, 50 years, you're putting in computer hardware, computer software that's got a lifespan of 3 to 5 years. And you've got to budget differently for technology. You've got to budget differently for how the operations and maintenance work on that. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just put the RSU out there. It's now you've got to budget the operations and maintenance of the RSU and the replacement of the RSU, and that replacement is on a different cycle. So it's really telling the story correctly, documenting what we're doing, and then figuring out those long-term funding solutions that don't just deploy hardware, but that allow us to operate and maintain that effectively. Because for far too long, funding is great for putting something in the roadway with technology, but it's horrible for keeping it up, keeping the lights on.
Dedicated, budgeted funding. Good points, Greg, Steve, Suzanne. Funding
I think
thoughts?
that, yeah, in order to prepare for this, I spoke to a handful of clients this week, and those were the answers they gave me. Maybe Greg and Steve spoke to the same clients. So, and I'll augment a little bit. I think to say what Greg said a little bit differently is life cycle costs for projects, right? It's not only It's not only putting up the roadside unit, as Steve said, or as Greg said, but being able to take care of the project through the whole lifespan. And then specifically in the local areas, as Steve said, being able to do set-asides for them, because if we want to look at equity, if that is indeed something we are trying to achieve, if we don't have set-asides, if we don't have a common understanding of where are the needs for equity, and we aren't able to set aside funding for them, they can't always afford the level of sophistication that it takes to be, and the cost to hire a consultant to, to put together a really slick, nice looking grant, and to go win money. That takes an investment, and the local areas that Steve mentioned, and specifically the areas which are underserved, don't have the funding to be able to do that. So maybe there's also room for simplifying grants or grant applications, and making the applications more easy to achieve, and don't require a lot of funding to be able to go after those.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Suzanne, on the grants and life cycle cost as well. I think one of the things we need to think about as well is how do we make it cool and sexy to do a ribbon cutting on a TISMO project for politicians. That's something that will get people thinking about this more. Kathy, any more questions out there?
Yes, we have a few. So I will start with this. What role does or will integrated corridor management play in near-term 5-year technological advancement?
That's a really good one. I'll go with Suzanne first, but I'll tell you that I've only been in California for almost 2 years. When I was in Tennessee, we launched a project called the I-24 Smart Corridor that I basically stole the idea, and several other people working in the ITS side of TDOT stole the idea, and Commissioner Schroer, who was my boss at the time, from the I-80 Smart Corridor project in the Bay Area here in California. I think it's probably one of the first ones that really sort of used that integrated corridor approach. So California's really been leading the way, and this was 4 or 5 years ago when I believe I came here to visit that project. But Suzanne, integrated corridors, how does this help us?
Sure. So it enables movement across a whole area, right? It enables improvement across a whole area, and not just a block or a corner or an intersection, which is a fantastic way of moving us forward over the next 5 years. Also, typically an integrated corridor will allow a local agency to be able to manage that road, and then set an example, as you said, for the areas around it, and create an integration. Georgia has done a really great job with that, with some of their connected vehicle deployments, and thereby enabling some of the counties around to build out more integrated corridors.
Steve?
Yeah, I think that definitely hits on it. And to me, integrated corridor management also begins to really spread a new philosophy throughout all the planners and engineers that are looking at a lot of these projects. And going back to your home state, Tokes, with the Innovate 680 project up in Contra Costa County is a great example of an ICM project that just exploded into a toolkit of different solutions, of looking at transit first last mile, of looking at connection protection, at looking at all different types of solutions that could be done along a particular corridor. And it really gets everybody thinking again. That's how it's always been done, is thrown out. And they're really looking at that whole project spurred a lot of thought about how we can think about this differently. And it's actually kind of spurred on the I-880 project and other activities that are going on now in that area. And I know others around the country look at projects like that and go, we should be thinking about it that way too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Greg? I
was just scrolling through a text message from a colleague to see if I could find the date, but the US DOT did their ICM program and going back 20, 25 years or so, and getting that program kicked off. And it was, at the time, it was very innovative of how do we take the freeway and the parallel roadways and the transit and everything else and link it into a corridor as opposed to a road by road approach. And it was innovative then, and we're still trying to figure out how to implement a lot of those details today. And Steve and Suzanne and Tokes, you mentioned a number of examples around the country where we've done a good job. In Florida, where I live, the FRAME program is something that they're working on with the freeways and connected vehicles and the parallel arterials. So we need to continue to look at those solutions and look for those solutions. And going back to some of the previous conversations, technology as we move forward is really enabling us to do things differently today than we could have 5, 10, 15 years ago, in the ability to reroute traffic, in the ability to get to motorists, whether it's through in-dash from the telematics providers, or in-dash from a connected vehicle device, or linked in through my iPhone or my Android device. So there's a lot of different ways that we can get access to the users of the transportation system that we didn't have before. There's better ways to collect data, going back to Steve's point, where there's data coming in from all these devices that we didn't have before to the granularity that we have today, that allow us to provide better direction and make better choices. So we need to just continue to focus. We need to look at where technology can help us, and we need to think outside of the box with our partners, whether it's public or private, on how we can implement some of these solutions.
That's good stuff. I don't know if Kathy, you've got one more before we close?
One more. Yes,
okay.
I think this will be, we are at 2:56, so that's a cue to you all to moderate your answers. So this also came in, given there is likely to be a new infusion of funds in infrastructure, we've all been at the news, how can we ensure significant funding goes toward technology deployment?
Yeah, we'll be real quick on that one, Kathy. I think we touched on it a little bit already. I think, using the data that's out there to show how this helps the return on investment, explaining the benefits of equity, being able to tell the stories related to how technology helps us achieve our goals and solutions for transportation, I think is going to be key. We need to use our data better that we currently use it to be able to tell those important stories. I'll start with Greg, Suzanne, and Steve. Close us out here. Greg?
I think you're right. We need to tell the story better. We need to find those projects that we can quickly turn around and be able to provide those benefits. I go back to the I-4 frame project, some of the things that we're doing with ATS PMs and being able to operate our traffic signal system more efficiently by simply upgrading the controller and putting in better detection and signals. That the technology has advanced to allow us to do that better today than any time in the past. So integrating in transit priority, integrating in freight priority to those projects is really what's going to provide those benefits, and we can turn them around very quickly. We don't need to wait to go through an environmental clearance process and go through a formal design and have a procurement that takes 3 to 5 years to get through that process. We can turn some of these around by the end of the calendar year. If we get the money today, we can push quickly.
Good stuff. Suzanne?
Yeah, really quickly, I think that we've done great with allowing them in existing grant language, and set aside allowing technology specifically in there is very important, enabling broadband. And Greg, I think it was 2005. Steve?
Again, to pull your point from earlier, Tokes, about the holistic approach, it encourages us to think about the end user. And instead of technology in search of a problem, it's a problem in search of technology. And when you're solving problems and people are seeing results, they're much more identified with that funding. They're much more willing to support future funding along those lines. And we all know in politics that it all starts with the voters and the citizens at the end of the road here. So as long as they're supporting it, it's a lot easier to get politicians to support it.
That's good stuff. Good way to end, especially with the national debate that we're having on infrastructure right now. Shaylin, Kathy, you guys want to close this out real quickly? Thank you for setting up this very important discussion about future-proofing our technology, our transportation system, rather, for the future.
Well, it was our pleasure. Tokes, Suzanne, Greg, Steve, thank you all so much for taking time out of your day. was a terrific discussion, and thanks to all who participated on behalf of ITS America. And I'm sure we will see you all in the internet land very soon. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys.